Sir Michael Singleton observed the entire situation with us here in the studio. If you had been an advisor to the former president, would you have recommended this approach? No, I would not have. The appeals needed, particularly to Latino men and black men, are essential. During a break, I mentioned that some black men I've spoken with in focus groups have expressed mixed feelings. I'm interested in understanding why they might consider voting for him. What is their reasoning? From my recent text exchanges and their comments, many have said, I don't know if I'd vote for her, but I don't like this. If this continues, I'm probably not going to vote for him. Therefore, despite any potential numerical advantages the former president might have gained, he must tread carefully. The situation is sensitive. Although she has Indian and Jamaican heritage, she is perceived as black by the majority of black Americans. When evaluating Kamala Harris, it's clear that she is part of our community because she genuinely is one of us. She attended Howard University and went on to become the Attorney General of the largest state in the country. Regardless of any differences of opinion people might have with the vice president, most black individuals are willing to engage in discussions about those differences. They might not always agree, but they are open to having that conversation. However, when it comes to questioning the vice president's ethnicity, it crosses a line. While I'm hesitant to express my full thoughts on this matter publicly, I believe it was a deliberate misstep. It is something I would not have done. The reason I refrain from being more explicit is because this is a television setting, and there are certain words and expressions that are not appropriate for live broadcast. It's important to acknowledge that this situation was not handled well. There were some positive moments for him regarding the economy. For example, during the discussion with Harris and Kadia, she posed some very direct questions. However, overall, it is unclear what substantial benefit he gained from this appearance. Many black viewers might watch this and conclude that it reinforces their reluctance to support the former president or the Republican Party. They may view it as evidence of why they would not provide overwhelming support to them. I'm interested in your opinion on a recurring statement he has made, which he emphasized more today. When asked for clarification, he seemed to disregard the question. He claims to be the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. As a Republican, how would you respond to this claim? On what basis does he make this assertion? Are there tangible benefits to support this claim? In terms of conservatism and cultural issues, there might be some alignment, but is there a concrete metric to substantiate his position? Are we performing well economically? Yes, I believe we're doing better than Democrats and liberalism in areas like international relations, free trade, and capitalism. However, when presenting these assessments to people who have experienced systemic issues historically faced by the majority of black individuals, and claiming to be the best compared to numerous presidents from the civil rights era to the end of slavery, it can seem disconnected. Many black people might respond with confusion, questioning the validity of these claims. To be candid, if I were advising the former president, I would suggest you have an opportunity to highlight positive contributions that Republicans could make to reduce costs and improve conditions for the average American, including many black people. But avoid making statements that could undermine your credibility. Do you think he embarrassed himself? I don't believe this was a favorable moment for him. As you know, I often come on this network to discuss the positive aspects of the president's actions and accomplishments. We've had those discussions before. However, it would be disingenuous for me as a black man, regardless of my political views, to come on this network and pretend that this was a commendable moment when it clearly was not. Now let's turn to Jarrett Hill. Jarrett is the former president of the Los Angeles chapter of the NABJ, and he's joining us virtually. Jarrett, having observed the situation, what are your thoughts? I found myself disagreeing with much of what Michael and the actors mentioned earlier in the show, but I do find myself in agreement with him regarding this particular moment. The situation echoes a headline about Kamala Harris being described as having turned black, which harks back to the era of Barack Obama. It seems to be an attempt to provoke a birtherism debate about her racial identity. To me, this feels outdated, worn out, and antagonistic. Earlier in the discussion, Michael suggested that this moment was an opportunity to connect with Black voters. I strongly disagree with that viewpoint because these moments don't genuinely aim to engage with Black people. If you examine his actions, there's nothing in this interview that demonstrates a genuine outreach to Black individuals. Instead, it seems to be about appealing to white people who might feel less racist by seeing him associating with Black people, appearing at Black conventions and similar events. I'm not even sure if that goal was achieved this year. In his remarks about the vice president, he did precisely what we anticipated with regard to race and gender. He mispronounced her name and belittled her as a woman, which is consistent with his previous actions. These moments present him with a chance to reach out to Black voters and demonstrate that he is not a misogynist or racist. However, we have not seen him take that opportunity. Instead, we have observed him attacking Black women on the panel and criticizing the organization, claiming their equipment was inadequate. Moreover, while we were positioned in the back, other reports indicated that he was resisting fact-checking. It is quite frustrating to observe this, especially when it occurs on stage. As a presidential candidate competing against Kamala Harris, Donald Trump specifically targeted her for failing the bar exam on her first attempt, a challenge that many people face. In fact, in certain years in California, the number of individuals failing the bar exam surpasses those who pass it. This issue has been widely discussed by prominent figures. For instance, Hillary Clinton addresses it in her book, FDR, noting that even well-known individuals have failed the bar exam. However, Kamala Harris achieved something that Donald Trump has not. She passed the bar exam, while Trump has not made his academic record public. I am curious about the impact of discussing academic achievements, particularly when Harris's academic record is notably impressive. One of the most intriguing aspects of Donald Trump is his tendency toward projection. When Donald Trump is perceived as a criminal, which is the case now, he tends to label others as criminals. Similarly, if he is viewed as racist, he accuses others of being racist. This behavior demonstrates his tendency to project his own shortcomings onto others. The issue of education is a prime example of this projection. When Trump calls someone stupid, lazy, or not valuable, he is essentially projecting his own flaws and shortcomings. This pattern of behavior is consistent and recurrent. For instance, Trump previously operated a for-profit university that was eventually shut down due to fraudulent practices, which reflects the same kind of projection and dishonesty seen in his other actions. Donald Trump has a well-documented history of engaging in behavior that targets individuals in a derogatory manner. This pattern of behavior is evident when he labels Kamala Harris as uneducated or not intelligent. Such comments are not merely personal attacks, but are rooted in a broader context of racism. The consistent disparagement of Black individuals as lazy or unqualified reflects a troubling trend we have observed in his actions. This behavior aligns with Trump's established pattern of making discriminatory remarks, which suggests that his comments about Harris are part of a larger, problematic strategy. It's unclear what Trump hopes to achieve with these statements or how they benefit him politically or personally. For the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, this situation represents a particularly difficult moment, highlighting ongoing challenges and biases that affect the organization and its members. On Wednesday, former President Donald Trump made his first major attempt to challenge the newly updated Democratic ticket, and it was not successful for him. During a live interview at a convention of Black journalists in Chicago, Trump made a series of controversial comments. He quickly found himself making racially insensitive remarks about Vice President Kamala Harris, questioning her identity and qualifications. This stumble not only drew criticism, but also highlighted his tendency to make problematic statements. When questioned about Republicans who assert that Kamala Harris, the first woman of Black and Asian descent to serve as vice president, was selected for the role as part of a diversity initiative, Trump responded by implying that Harris only recently became Black. Trump claimed she was always of Indian heritage and she was only promoting Indian heritage. He then made the controversial statement, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago, until she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. This remark elicited audible gasps and murmurs from those present, according to reporters in the room. During the Q&A session at the National Association of Black Journalists, Trump continued to emphasize his point about Kamala Harris's ancestry, despite interruptions from moderator Rachel Scott of ABC News. Scott pointed out that Harris attended a historically black college and has consistently identified as black. Trump dismissed this by saying she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person. This exchange was one of several tense moments in the session and highlighted the Trump campaign's struggles to counteract Harris's growing influence. This challenge has been exacerbated since President Joe Biden decided to withdraw from his re-election bid. The interview represented Donald Trump's initial significant effort to shift his campaign strategy, originally aimed at defeating Joe Biden, towards addressing a younger and more formidable opponent. This attempt highlighted the challenges faced by both Trump and the broader Republican movement when confronting a woman of color without resorting to misogynistic or racist rhetoric. Although Trump's supporters might resonate with his direct critique of Kamala Harris as a mere political token, this approach could exacerbate Trump's weaknesses with swing voters as the election nears its final, crucial phase, which appears to be highly competitive. Just hours after the incident, Trump reinforced his stance that individuals of mixed heritage cannot identify as more than one ethnicity. He posted a video on his Truth Social account featuring Harris and, in his words, saying she's Indian, not black, and labeled her as a stone-cold phony. In response, Michael Tyler, the campaign communications director for Harris, issued a statement titled, "Statement on Donald Trump Showing Exactly Who He Is at NABJ." In this statement, Tyler condemned Trump's remarks as a reflection of the chaos and division that have characterized Trump's MAGA rallies throughout his entire campaign. Trump's remarks concerning Kamala Harris's mixed heritage elicited an immediate response from the White House. During a press briefing, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was presented with Trump's quote, which questioned Harris's racial identity. In her response, Jean-Pierre, who is a person of color and a black woman herself, expressed strong condemnation of Trump's comments. She described the remarks as repulsive and insulting, emphasizing that no one has the right to dictate how someone should identify. Jean-Pierre's reaction underscores the significance of respecting individual identities and the inappropriateness of Trump's comments in this context. At least one Republican was outraged by the remarks. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska expressed her frustration, stating, "Nobody's helping the voters out here by talking about the substance of the issue, which we should be focusing on." Murkowski, who has been increasingly critical of Trump's candidacy, took issue with the GOP's focus on cultural commentary. This includes remarks by Senator J.D. Vance, who referred to women who do not have children as childless cat ladies. Murkowski's criticism highlights her concern that such statements distract from addressing substantive policy issues that are crucial for voters. In the statement, she questions the relevance of discussing superficial aspects like appearances, ancestry, or personal backgrounds, such as Polish or Irish heritage. She emphasizes that these topics are inconsequential and questions why they are being debated. The 34-minute exchange between Trump, Scott, and two other journalists was marked by tension. Trump expressed frustration about not being able to hear the questions properly, blamed the delayed start of the discussion on technical issues with the conference, and criticized Kamala Harris for not attending the National Association of Black Journalists, NABJ, event. In his most watched public appearance since Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket, Donald Trump's responses remained characteristically abrasive and sharp. His reactions included labeling one of the questions from Tim Scott as nasty. Despite claiming that the assassination attempt earlier this month had altered his perspective and approach, Trump's behavior revealed that he is still very much the same person he has always been. The interview, originally scheduled to last for an hour, began an hour late. However, it was cut short after just 34 minutes, a decision reportedly made at the request of Trump's campaign, according to the moderator, Katia Goba from Semaphore. Despite the shortened duration, the interview had already made a significant impact. Ben LaBolt, the White House communications director, expressed his anticipation of editorials calling for Trump to withdraw from the race based on his performance that day. He made this comment on his personal X account. Anthony Scaramucci, a venture capitalist and former ally of Donald Trump, who briefly served as his White House communications director, expressed strong disapproval on social media. He criticized the decision-makers behind Trump's recent interview, suggesting that those responsible should be dismissed from their positions. Meanwhile, Republican strategist Michael Singleton, who appeared shortly after Trump exited the stage in Chicago, offered a more direct critique. He cautioned against such remarks, emphasizing the sensitivity of the issue. Singleton pointed out that, from the perspective of many Black Americans, Kamala Harris is perceived as Black, and he was deeply troubled by Trump's questioning of her ethnicity. Singleton's comments conveyed his frustration and strong feelings about the inappropriate nature of Trump's statements. In his statement, Trump noted that historically, the vice president's role has little influence on the outcome of elections. He argued that typically, a vice presidential pick does not impact voters' decisions, as the primary focus remains on the presidential candidate. Trump also criticized Kamala Harris, labeling her as Biden's border czar, and reiterated his stance on pardoning individuals convicted of participating in the January 6, 2021 Capitol insurrection. Furthermore, he suggested that Black voters should consider voting Republican for economic reasons. However, these comments were overshadowed by Trump's insensitive remarks on racial issues. His lack of tact and disregard for racial sensitivities became the focal point, overshadowing his other political statements. Trump reacted negatively to the initial question posed to him, which highlighted several of his past comments perceived as racist. These included questioning former President Barack Obama's American citizenship, telling 4 congresswomen of color to go back to where they came from, referring to Black district attorneys as animals, and criticizing Black journalists for what he considered stupid questions. Scott questioned, "Why should Black voters trust you after you've used language like that?" Trump's response was defensive. "I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner." He criticized ABC as a fake news network and dismissed Scott's question as disgraceful. However, Trump's reaction to a subsequent question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, only served to further underscore the reason behind the original question. The visit unfolded like an intensive crash course on the intricacies of cargo economics and security, as California's new senator posed a rapid succession of questions to the leaders of the Port of Los Angeles during her whirlwind tour of the cargo hub on Wednesday. She inquired about the impact of technology on jobs, seeking to understand how advancements have transformed the workforce within the port. The senator also probed into the existing infrastructure, questioning what essential needs remain unaddressed to ensure the efficient operation of the port. Additionally, she expressed concern about cybersecurity, asking about the measures currently in place to safeguard against potential cyber attacks. This series of pointed questions highlighted her keen interest in understanding the multifaceted challenges and opportunities faced by one of the nation's busiest ports. Kamala Harris, a freshman senator, traveled through Southern California on a busy itinerary. Her tour included visits to various critical infrastructure locations, such as ports, naval facilities, and an outpatient center in South Los Angeles. These sites heavily depend on federal funding, which faced potential cuts under the Trump administration. Throughout her visits, Harris engaged actively with officials at the ports, asking numerous questions to understand the operations and the implications of the potential budget cuts. Her inquiries were thorough and detailed, reflecting her concern for the potential impacts on these facilities. After concluding her session with the port officials, she seemed to have a lingering question and looked around, indicating her intent to gather as much information as possible before wrapping up her tour. This proactive approach by Senator Harris highlights her dedication to understanding the challenges faced by key infrastructure components in her state, and her commitment to addressing potential federal funding issues. The statement, "What else do you want me to know? I am here to fight for you," reflects Kamala Harris's commitment to understanding and addressing the concerns of her constituents. This declaration emphasizes her role as a dedicated advocate for the people she represents. Within just 6 months of taking office, Kamala Harris, a native of the Bay Area and a former prosecutor and state attorney general, is making significant strides in her political career. Despite her established reputation in Northern California, Harris is now focusing on increasing her presence in the southern half of the state, where she is less well known. Her efforts to gain a stronger foothold in this region demonstrate her strategic approach to expanding her influence and support base. In Washington, Harris is rapidly building her reputation as a fervent critic of Donald Trump. Her outspoken stance against Trump has garnered attention and is contributing to her growing prominence on the national stage. This dual approach, strengthening her position within California while making a name for herself in national politics, highlights Harris's ambitious and proactive nature. Overall, Harris's early actions in office underscore her dedication to both her constituents and her broader political goals. Her efforts to connect with more Californians and her vocal opposition to Trump are central to her strategy for establishing a robust and influential political career. Kamala Harris' straightforwardness has played a crucial role in establishing her as a prominent figure in the California resistance. This has sparked early discussions about her potential presidential ambitions. In her initial months in office, Harris has demonstrated a bold, progressive approach, marking a departure from her earlier reputation of cautiousness. She has shown that she is willing to challenge the traditional, often conservative norms of the Senate. During the peak of the protests against President Donald Trump's first travel ban in January, the urgency of the situation became evident when she reached out to Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly at his home. She had been receiving frantic messages from lawyers at San Francisco International Airport, SFO, and Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. These lawyers were reporting that their clients were being prevented from entering the country despite a judge's order to halt the ban. In response to these urgent communications, she sought to urge Secretary Kelly to take action and address the situation. In a recounting by Harris, Kelly, a retired four-star general, questioned her decision to call him at home by asking, "Why are you calling me at home?" To which Harris responded, "Because these families are there and there's a stay that just got issued, so you need to let them go." This exchange underscores the urgency of the situation, where Harris emphasized the immediate need to address the impact of the legal stay on the families involved. In a recent interview conducted in her Senate office, Harris reflected on the broader implications of the current political climate. She emphasized that the stakes are incredibly high and stressed that the matters at hand are far more significant than mere theoretical debates between philosophers like Plato and Socrates. Instead, the focus is on concrete policies and administrative decisions that have real, tangible effects on the lives of individuals. This highlights her concern about the direct and significant impact that daily governmental decisions have on people's lives. Harris, the first new U.S. Senator from California since 1992, quickly emerged as a prominent figure opposing Donald Trump. In late January, she actively participated in the Women's March in Washington and joined protests outside the White House. She voted against 18 of Trump's top nominees, surpassing all but 5 other senators in the number of opposition votes. Utilizing her newly acquired platform, she has been vigorously criticizing Trump and his administration through a series of high-profile speeches. Unlike other first-term senators who, despite their political prominence, typically keep a low profile, Harris is breaking from this tradition. Senators such as Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Al Franken initially focused on acclimating to Washington and avoiding the spotlight. In contrast, Harris is assertively leveraging her position to challenge and confront the Trump administration. During the interview, Harris, who is a former prosecutor and state attorney general, began outlining a series of Trump's objectives: dismantling the Affordable Care Act, cutting funding for Planned Parenthood, denying climate change, and reigniting the war on drugs. Her voice grew increasingly intense as she delved into these topics, only to notice that she was becoming more agitated. Realizing her passionate response had taken on a speech-like quality, she laughed, relaxed back into her office couch, and said, "I didn't mean for this to turn into a speech. Write this down." Harris's confrontational stance appears to be a natural fit for her, aligning well with the sentiments of a predominantly Democratic state where residents are largely frustrated with the president. After White House officials announced that Trump was anticipated to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, Harris expressed strong disapproval on Twitter. She described the decision as the absolute wrong choice, criticizing it as detrimental to future generations and harmful to the nation's standing as a global leader. Jack Citron, a political science professor at UC Berkeley, stated, "Trump's election has given her the opportunity to elevate herself from being just another freshman senator. For California in particular, Trump is a great piñata." In Washington, Kamala Harris has concentrated on several significant issues, with immigration being a primary focus. Her initial legislative proposal, the Access to Counsel Act, aims to ensure that immigration officials allow attorneys to access individuals who are detained at U.S. ports of entry. Additionally, her team has assisted refugees affected by the travel ban in reconnecting with their families. Kamala Harris has co-sponsored several pieces of legislation aimed at protecting undocumented farm workers from deportation. She has also advocated for the Trump administration to uphold the waiver that allows California to enforce stringent vehicle emission standards. Additionally, she has effectively lobbied for disaster relief funding following the severe flooding in California earlier this year. In Senate hearings, Harris is known for her incisive questioning of Trump appointees. Her approach is typically direct and resembles a cross-examination, contrasting sharply with the more cordial and conversational style often seen in many senators' inquiries. She is actively involved in the Trump-Russia investigation as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Regarding the possibility of impeaching Trump, she stated, "Is there a potential for it? Apparently yes, but that's not something I'm going to call on at this point." This indicates that while she acknowledges the potential for impeachment, she is not yet advocating for it. However, her stance could shift. She has pledged to ask former FBI Director James Comey pointed and incisive questions when he appears before the committee next week. This suggests that her future decisions and positions might be influenced by the information and responses she gathers during Comey's testimony. The inquiry revolves around specific questions concerning the president's interactions with James Comey. Key points include direct communication. Was there a direct conversation between the president and Comey about the Russia investigation? Suggestions to halt the investigation. Did the president in any way imply to Comey that the investigation should be shut down or concluded prematurely? Attempts to interfere. Did the president make any attempts to interfere with the investigation? These questions were addressed by a reporter who, while starting a tour in Southern California, expressed a desire to uncover detailed answers about these aspects of the president's behavior regarding the investigation. Harris' emphasis on criticizing Trump is causing frustration among some of her Republican constituents. Sue Caro, the vice chairwoman for the Bay Area of the California Republican Party, expressed her discontent, stating she's spending a lot of time criticizing President Trump. Caro further highlighted that in California, there are pressing issues such as increasing poverty, deteriorating schools, and crumbling infrastructure. According to Caro, despite these significant challenges, Harris's focus seems to remain solely on Trump, repeatedly mentioning his name. This narrow focus on Trump is seen as a misallocation of attention and resources away from addressing more immediate and pressing state issues. Kamala Harris, whose parents are immigrants from India and Jamaica, has made history as the first Indian American and second female African American senator in the history of the United States. In addition to her groundbreaking role as a senator, Harris has assembled a notably diverse team for her office. Remarkably, 2/3 of her staff are people of color, and over half are women, setting her office apart from many other congressional offices in terms of diversity. Born in Oakland and raised in Berkeley, Harris's early life was shaped by her family's academic and professional backgrounds. Her parents met while pursuing graduate studies at UC Berkeley. After their divorce when Harris was young, she was primarily raised by her mother, Shyamala, who was a physician. Her father was an economics professor at Stanford University. This upbringing in a diverse and academically oriented environment contributed to Harris's perspective and career path. Kamala Harris attended Howard University, a historically black college located in Washington, D.C. During her time there, she launched her first political campaign, successfully winning the position of freshman class representative. Following her undergraduate studies, she interned for California Senator Alan Cranston, who previously held the Senate seat she occupies today. Harris earned her law degree from UC Hastings College of the Law and began her legal career as a prosecutor in Alameda County and San Francisco, where she handled serious criminal cases, including murder.